Chapter 18. Sam Jones. How dear to my heart was the old-fashioned hurler, who laboured all day on the old village green. He did not resemble the up-to-date twirler, who pitches 4 innings and ducks from the scene. The up-to-date twirler I'm not very strong for. He has a queer habit of pulling up lame. That's the reason I hanker and long for the pitcher who started and finished the game. The old-fashioned pitcher, the iron-arm pitcher, the stout-hearted pitcher who finished the game. George E. Fair. You know, I think the one reason I pitched so long is that I never wasted my arm throwing over to first and to keep runners close to the base. There was a time there for 5 years I never once threw to first base to chase a runner back. Not once in 5 years. Ripley put that in, believe it or not. Take a good lead on Jones, they all said around the league. He won't throw it. He never does. Well, I never did. Not for 5 years. And then one day I fooled him. I threw. Had the guy out by a mile, but the first baseman dropped the ball. Seems like I fooled him too. He claimed the shock was too much for him, and me setting the situation up to carefully and all. He didn't have to throw over to first to keep a runner on. I once heard Eddie Plank say there are only so many pitches in the old arm, and I did believe in wasting them throwing to first base. And he rarely did. Makes sense to me. I was just a young punk, and I figured it was good enough for Plank it showed it'd be good enough for me. What you do instead of throwing it is look at the guy on first. Yeah, that's all. Just stand there on the pitching rubber and look at him. No need to throw. If you stand there like you're ready to pitch and just stare at him long enough, he'll get it to be too much for him. Then he'll lean back toward the base. Then you pitch. Or else the batter won't be able to stand it anymore. And then he'll step out of the box and call him all time. That's all you have to do. Just stand there and wait. Of course, some of them bear more watching than others, like Ty Cobb, for example. But all you need is patience. I broke into the American League in 1914 with the Cleveland Indians. Never forget the fellows on that Cleveland club: Joe Jackson, Ray Chapman, Steve O'Neill, Terry Turner, Larry LaHoie, Willie Mitchell. I'll never forget how nice those fellows treated me. When I first came up, they were just wonderful. Of course, wherever I was, I always made friends easy. Every club I was ever on, everybody and me was friends. But this was different, being a rookie and all. Just a big country boy out of the hills here, and they made me feel right at home. You sure do remember that. Someone being so nice to you when you're just starting out. In 1916, Cleveland traded me and a fellow named Fred Thomas and $50,000 to Boston for a fellow named Tris Speaker. I sure did hate to leave that Cleveland club, though those guys were like big brothers to me. However, I started moving pretty good with the Red Sox, and it turned out that fellows at Boston were just as nice. Harry Hooper and Babe Ruth and all won 16 games and lost only 5 in 1918, and started that way when they're going good. Especially young ones. Goes to your head real quick. I remember one day in 1918, I was playing checkers in the clubhouse before the game. I pitched and won the day before, and was playing with the fellow who had just finished pitching batting practice. Walt Kinney was his name, a left-handed pitcher. While we were in the middle of the checker game, the bat boy comes in and says, "Mr. Barrow would like to see you out on the field. He wants you to have a picture taken, sir." "Okay," I said. "I'll be right out." Ed Barrow was the manager of the Red Sox then. About 5 minutes later, the bat boy comes back and, "Mr. Barrow wants you out there right away." Okay, I said, I'll tell him I'll be right there. About 5 minutes after that, a bit of a commotion in the clubhouse entrance, and in comes Mr. Barrow himself. As you might know, he was a pretty rough talker. Huge man with these fantastic brushy eyebrows. They always fascinated me. Couldn't take my eyes off them. Well, he gave me a good going over for sitting in the clubhouse playing checkers when he asked for me outside. And he winds up with, "What the hell are you doing in here in the first place?" "Well," I said, still sitting at the checkerboard, "I pitched yesterday, and Walt just finished pitching batting practice, so I didn't reckon either or one of us had any business out there just now necessarily." "The news photographer came all the way from Providence to take your picture," he says. "Is that so?" I said. "Well, he can go all the way back to Providence without it." Oh, did that get him? He turned on his heel and stormed out, then turned around and came back all the way back in again. I thought he was going to take a sock at me. He'd been known to do that on occasion, you know. "This will cost you $100, he shouted. His face was so red he could hardly talk, and you should have seen those eyebrows. "I'll make it 200, I said, still sitting there. "It's 200, all right." "Make it 300, I said, "then go straight to hell." "It's 300, he roars and slams the door. Finally, I went out on the field, and the photographer posed me and Mr. Barrow together, arms around each other's shoulders, both smiling, best friends ever. But as soon as the shutter clicked, we both walked real fast in opposite directions. Cocky young pitchers. Yeah, I was one, till I learned a little better. It doesn't take many 9-5 losses to bring you back down. After that simmered down, Ed Barrow and I got along just fine. I'd pitch for him any time he wanted me to, and he'd do anything for me. One day he was stuck and needed a relief pitcher real bad. I just pitched the day before, but after looking up and down at the bench, he said, "Sam, would you warm up and go in for us next inning?" "Sure," I said. Went down to the bullpen and to get loose. Well, I was all warmed up. I came back in. "I don't think I have too much today," I said, "but I'll try." "Good," he said. "I know at least you'll look like a pitcher." And later on, when Mr. Barrow became general manager of the Yankees, he brought me over there, and I guess I liked playing with the Yankees best of all. I was there for 5 years, 1922 through 1926. It was a good club to play for. They always had plenty of money, paid that real well, and drew good crowds. In 3 of the 5 years I was there, we won the pennant. Why, what more could you ask for? The Yankees always did things in a big way. Why, when the season was over, they'd even give each other 3 brand new baseballs. Just give them to us. No other club ever did that. Not to mention the fact was that we had a pretty fair to Midland ball club. Lou Gehrig at first, Tony Lazzari at second, Everett Scott or Mark Coing at shortstop, Joe Duggan at third and in the infield, Earl Combs had Bob Musial and a man named Ruth in the outfield, Wally Shang and Benny Benningu catching, Miller Huggins managing. Yes, a pretty fair ball club. And pitching, Herb Pennick, Urban Shocker, Bob Shockey, White Hoyt, Joe Bush, Carl Mays, George Pipgrass, myself. My goodness. People forget that the Yankees in the 20s were more than a great offensive club. They were the best defensive team in both leagues as well. That outfield, terrific pitching, a great infield. It was a well-balanced ball club in every way. Everybody played in the shadow of George Herman Ruth, of course, so a lot of people don't even remember who else was on the Yankees at the time. Oh, they remember Lou Gehrig, all right. One of the nicest fellows ever lived. Lou was. He'd never really got the publicity he deserved. A very serious-minded fellow, very modest and easy to get it along with. Always every inch a gentleman. Lou was the kind of boy, if you had a son, he's the kind of person you like your son to be. And they remember Tony Lazzari at second base. Maybe Tony was an epileptic, They say that's how he died a few years ago. Had a seizure and fell down the cellar steps. He had one of the best spells at most every spring on the trip back north, but never during a game. Tony was a very witty guy, full of fun, quiet to beat, but always up to something. Real nice guy, and a great second baseman, too. How they can keep leaving him out of the Hall of Fame is beyond me. And that was some outfield on the team. Bob Musial had a fantastic arm. He had an arm as long as this room. Know what I mean? Once he got his hands on a ball, it was as good as wherever he wanted to fire it. It was as good as there already. I've seen him throw flat-footed from deep in the outfield all the way to home plate on a low line, and very accurate too. Combs didn't have the good an arm, and he could really go get him. He could cover the whole outfield all by himself. And then there's Babe Ruth. Well, he was the champ. That's all you can say. I guess I saw my share of Mr. George Herman Ruth. Not much doubt about that. I broke into the American League the same year he did, 1914, and left 1 year after him. The Babe's last year was 1934, and mine was 1935. I was his teammate on the Red Sox for 4 years, and then went to the Yankees, and I was teammates with him there for 5. We won 5 pennants and 3 World Series together. And the rest of the years, I faced him from a distance of 60 feet 6 inches. I'll tell you one thing. When Jidge was up at bat, that pitching distance seemed to shrink somehow. Maybe it was still 60 feet, but it felt more like 6. Babe Ruth could hit a ball so hard and so far that it was sometimes impossible to believe your eyes. We used to absolutely marvel at his hits. Tremendous wallops. You can't imagine the balls he hit. And before that, he was a great pitcher too. Really great. In fact, he was strictly a pitcher when I first played with him on the Red Sox in 1916. After I came over from the Cleveland Indians. Of course, for a while, he did both. In 1917, he won 24 games for us as a pitcher, and also batted about 325. It was hard to believe that natural ability that man had. Well, to give you an example, in 1920, he hit over 50 home runs all by himself, and everybody else in the whole rest of the league added together only about 300 homers. That's a fact. Look it up if you don't believe it. About 1 of every 7 home runs hit in the American League that year was hit by Babe Ruth. Excuse me. My God, if he was playing today, nowadays it hit about 1,500 homers this season in the American League. Babe was as good relative to everybody else today, like he used to be. He hit over 200 homers a season. That'll give you an idea of how the big fellow dominated baseball back then. Take Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Killebrew, and anybody else you watched and want to name today, and add them all up, and they still won't match Babe Ruth's home runs relative to the rest of the league. I should say, of course, that when I pitched against him, he never gave me much trouble, but it's not so much. I always figured that the best way to pitch to Ruth, especially in a pinch when he was pinch hitting, was to walk him. Maybe that's why I stayed in the American League so long, from 1914 through 1935. 22 consecutive years of pitching in the American League. No one's ever done that before or since. I was 43 when I finally retired, came back home to Woods Field, Ohio, where I was born. Bill McGeehan of the Herald Tribune used to call me Sad Sam, the sorrowful sage from Woodsfield. He used to watch me on the field, and I always looked sort of downcasted to him. So Sad Sam, actually what it was, I would always wear my cap down real low over my eyes, and the sports writers were more used to fellows like Hoyt, who always wear their caps way up so they wouldn't miss he wouldn't miss any pretty girls. Well, of course, I don't know about being any sage. I would always ask for advice. Listen. Of course, you had to be a little careful about who you ask. My idea about getting a point of view is to feel your way along. I always sit there and observe everything that went on. Golly, I don't know why, but whenever anything went wrong, they blame me. Heck, I was just watching things, but if someone's shoes were nailed down or socks tied in knots, it seemed like I always get the blame. Never could understand it. I guess in all of those years of pitching, my biggest thrill came in when I pitched a no-hitter for the Yankees on September 4th, 1923. It was against Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics. I realized it was going along round about the fourth or fifth inning. You begin to realize that nobody's got to hit it yet, and then you start to get a little tense. But when I come back to the bench between innings, no one would say a word to me about a no-hitter or anything like that. Then scoreboards and only gave it the score. They didn't have things like hits and errors and the score boards in those days. Along near the end of the game, I started to get real tired, way more than usual. Chick Galloway, the A's shortstop, was the last man up in the bottom of the ninth. "I'm going to break up if I can," he yelled at me, and he bunted down the third base line. I fielded it, threw him out, and there it was, a no-hitter. Terrific thrill as soon as it was over. The fans and all the players flocking down on the field to congratulate me. But I think the biggest kick of all came the next day when I got telegrams from all over the country, from people all over the whole country, who takes the time to send me a wire. But baseball is a game where you feel great one day and down in the dumps the next. I pitched that no-hitter on September 4th, and then the dumps, and then only a few weeks later, I lost a 1-0 World Series game to the New York Giants. That was the first World Series ever. It played at the old Yankee Stadium, 1923. And the game, the third of the series, was played before the largest crowd ever to see a baseball game anywhere up to that time, about 65,000 people. Art Neff and I both pitched shutouts through 6 innings, and then in the 7th, Casey Stengel hit one of my fastballs into right field. Stands. That was the only run of the game, and Neff beat me 1-0. Oh, that really hurt. But you know that Art Neff was a really nice fellow, awfully nice, and a wonderful pitcher too. Managed to stay up there a good long time, saw a lot of wonderful things. 22 years in the American League, 5 World Series, something. And all that time, I don't remember ever being nervous before a game. A bit impatient maybe, but not really nervous. I was a bit of like those horses pawing the ground in the stocks of a rodeo, sort of eager to get started. I couldn't keep still before the game began, especially if it was my day to pitch. Didn't know what to do with myself. Back and forth, one place to the other, going to the bathroom. Thought you had to go, but you really didn't. Doing this and that, and I don't call that really nervous, do you? More like just a waiting for us to get in there.